our destination.
Happy Valentine's Day. Let's go for a ride.
Welcome to Girls Trip and happy Valentine's Day. We hope that you've had fun over the last 2 weeks talking about Galentine's, Valentine's, love, and everything in between. We are ending the celebration trying to keep you in love in your relationship, in your marriage, whatever it may be. Just sharing some of the best tidbits and advice that we have gotten, or maybe just come to out of hard-earned practice. Yes. And we would love to hear any that you have to share with us
please.
as well.
Yes, please.
I feel like the number one thing, well, I feel like two. My parents always have said, never stop dating each other, and to always laugh. Make sure that you laugh together as much as possible. That when they say laughter is the best medicine, that it's really true. And that if you can pursue that you'll always be having a good time together. Yeah. So I feel like I always have that playing in the back of my mind. Totally. And they've modeled that. So I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah. Something your dad always likes to say is when he's talking about him and my mother-in-law, him and his wife, he always says, we always have a competition to see who could spoil the other one the most. And they definitely do that. They model that very, 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 very well. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. All right. What's your two?
Okay. So my two seemingly are not good with each other. I was like, where are we going?
Are they?
They're not very
counterintuitive.
Good yeah, counterintuitive. Yeah. So when we first got married, I remember someone telling me, and it's so cliche, but it's in the back of my head all the time, just like yours. The honeymoon never has to end. And we took that very literally when we went on our honeymoon 3 years after our wedding. And we kind of, in a funny way, like I will always bring at my bridal shower, my now mother-in-law got me a bag that said, honeymoon on it. It was a big canvas bag that I took with me to Florida that year. But that's the bag that I take with me whenever we go on vacation because in our heads, this is just a continuation of our first honeymoon. And we try to just take that very seriously. Like we don't have to come back to reality. Like we can continue this beautiful trip of just the two of us and have fun. So there's that. And the other one that seems to completely have nothing to do with the first one. It wasn't even given as advice. It was just a more mature woman telling me about her marriage, and was just going through like telling me how they met, and they've been married for 40 years. And she said it so passively.
I know you're gonna
you know what I'm gonna say. She said it so
PG-13.
She said it so passively, and no, not that.
Oh, okay. I was like, I feel like I know where this one is.
No, not that. That's really
That's
funny.
The Patreon.
Yeah, no, that's not that. She said it so passively, and it was just she didn't mean anything, and she just kept talking, but it like resounded in me. She said, some years you just hate each other. And I was like,
You're like,
oh my God. Like she didn't say sometimes.
Right.
She didn't say some days. She said some years you just hate each other. And I was like, oh my God. Like we talk about ups and downs, right? But there must be when life hits you, right? And you're with each other for 40 years. I mean, there are just probably such large pockets of times where it's so difficult. And it's like you have to press through. And it's like you can, when those pockets of time do come, instead of saying, well, this is obviously the end, instead of seeing it like that, like, no, like this is just something we have to get through.
Yeah.
This is longer than maybe a fight at night. But we can get through this.
Yeah.
So that has always stuck with me. Two very different
ways.
Two very different ways of thinking. But I think they're both important. You need both of those, right? So yeah, those are my two.
Yeah.
So Joy kind of stole my first one.
Oh, I'm so
it's
sorry.
Okay. It's a little different. So on our first, I have to say we always have two weddings. So on our original wedding, we had a very close couple. I see them as like a second set of parents for me. And they pulled us aside and they told us this beautiful story, which I will not disclose because you only can hear it when you get married. That was the rule when they told us this. So basically, again, you're always on your honeymoon. That there should never be a moment, and it shouldn't be a phase. It's like every day you're on your honeymoon. So like when we go to see them, or, you know, if they're checking in or something, they'll be like, on the honeymoon. Aww. And you're just like, yes. Some days you're like, always on the honeymoon. Always on the honeymoon.
Love it.
And it's not like you're in denial, but it's just like, no, like you're saying, I'm going to put my best foot forward on those hard days. And I'm going to say, yes, I love my spouse. Like I love him, and I'm going to sacrifice or whatever it is. Because the story that they say is like, it comes to a very tumultuous end, but then someone says that phrase and they brings them right back, and they're like, you know what? We made that vow to each other. Yeah. We're always on our honeymoon. So it's just something that stuck with me, and I say that in all like the cards we write and stuff like that.
I mean, I feel like if we're being like really honest with you guys, like, you know, honeymoons are great, but there's a lot of moments in those honeymoons.
Yes. That's another episode. Because I got stories.
Are God's way of being
like welcome. Like there's some difficult moments, there's some confusing moments. There's a lot to navigate.
Especially if you did it the way we did it. There's a lot of confusing stuff going on.
So like they're joyful, and you're probably somewhere like warm and tropical, and that's amazing. But I feel like the key with saying that is not that everything's perfect, because it wasn't perfect on your honeymoon either. No. But when you're on your honeymoon, you have the perspective of going into marriage being like, we're doing this. Yes. Yeah. Like this is
new love, this excitement.
Yeah. We're committed to this. So I think that's like more the magic in that advice.
Yeah.
It's
nothing like superficial. It's really what was at its core in the very beginning. Bring that back.
The love that you felt the day after you got married, right? Because that's typically when you go on your honeymoon, like right after, like that, like spark that love, like make sure that that's at the core of everything that you're doing right now, even if it's 1 year later or 10 years later.
And then the other thing is your husband, Joy Thomas, told me on our wedding day.
Okay.
I know. I was like, I will not say this.
Do tell.
So I forget. We were just talking too, so it wasn't like I have some advice. But I forget how it came up. But he was like, I think he might have said that either his parents told him this or something, but kind of along the lines of spoiling. But he's like, you always want to outserve the other, no matter what it is. If you have that intention behind everything, like I want to bless you, I want to spoil you, I want to, serve you in any way. Like that's what marriage, I think, is at its core. It's like you're serving. It's not what do I get out of it. It's like what can I bring and what can I show and share with you. So I was like, like you hear that, but it was just like at that moment, just getting married, you're like, okay, that's something to remember. Yeah. So I always remember that in that moment too.
Yeah. So I feel like the advice that I learned the hard way in being married was not one, like it's so obvious, right? Like everyone tells you, remember that you're on the same team. And I think when you're dating or when you're newly married, like you kind of dismiss that a little bit, because you're like, well, yeah. You don't need to tell me that. Like we're getting married for a reason, It's
also
like,
you against them sometimes when you're dating, right? Because there's people over you, and it's like you have to band together, and then all of a sudden things change, man. Yeah.
And I think that I found myself sometimes a couple years in, like in these arguments or whatever, and then having to reflect later and look back on that and be like, what were we doing? Yeah. Like we ultimately wanted the same thing. Yeah. We just lost sight of that and like forgot, like who is this serving? Whether it was like me needing to be right, like and making that the most important, or whatever, just things not working out, and just remembering like we are on the same team. We do want to, we have the same vision. And maybe the way that we're going about things isn't always going to align or be the same. And there's going to be some bumps in the road. But the more that you can keep that at front of mind, I feel like in the last, 6-7 years, like the amount that we argue over or get upset about has declined so drastically in comparison to the first, 4 or 5 years of being married. Yeah. That it's just like, yeah, that's not worth it. I don't want to have that many regrets of like time spent wasted being upset with you or arguing or feeling hurt or any of that. Because time is precious. Like we don't have all of it. And I want to make the most of what we had. So that has definitely been one that I had to learn, you know, myself.
What's the most cliche piece of advice if you had to think of one? I think I have mine in my head.
I mean, I just feel like everything I said was cliche.
I feel like mine, I mean, it's not, I guess, a phrase, but it's just something I saw my parents do, is they just always had fun.
Yeah.
Like they, you know, when you had the opportunity, go have a good time together.
Yeah.
Cause I mean, they say, like you said, you always want to be dating and stuff like that. And then kids come to the picture and it's different, but always assign that time to just go have fun, like do something.
I mean, for Miles and I, we do laugh about this. Like, take away our shared sense of humor. I don't know what we got left. We have like no shared hobbies. We just like each other. You're just like, yeah, you're cute. I like you. We share the same sense of humor. So if we're not laughing and having fun,
you're like, what are we doing?
It's not going to be good.
That's so true. Oh my gosh. The most cliche piece of advice, which I heard today, ironically, was don't go to bed angry. And as often as that is said, there's a lot of truth to that, to settle things before you both fall asleep.
Well, here's what I've learned about that.
Talk to me. You know what? We actually have talked about this a lot and what that could morph into and mean. But
because I think that can be a little misleading.
Of course,
because sometimes when I first hear that, like my hackles go up, and I'm like, "Don't you tell me," you know.
Yeah.
But I think when you dig a little bit deeper into where that advice is coming from, it's not that things need to be resolved or settled necessarily before you go to bed, because that's like, you know,
almost impossible
I
sometimes.
couldn't ignore that advice because it's biblical. It's coming from, you know, from the source there. But I always had like a little bit of a problem with that because I'm not good at that. And you know, I always was kind of like just being dismissive of that. Like, well, I can't, you know, live up to that expectation. So let's just like remove that.
Yeah.
Until I kind of like got it. And it was like, okay, we can maybe still have an issue or things not be resolved or whatever, because my husband and I deal with things very differently. Where I want to like attack it and he needs time to like process and like, you know, whatever. So it isn't always possible to like, let's come to kumbaya before it's time to go to bed, especially if, you know, the argument's breaking out at 11:34 and you're like, what are we doing
now
here?
What?
But you can still go to bed saying we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And we are committed to resolving
this.
this, to settling it, to coming back to this at a later time. And so, that took me, you know, a long time to like figure out really what does that mean in reality.
Yeah. For me at this point in our marriage, it's all I need to hear is, because my husband's the same way. He needs space. He needs time he needs space. And
I'm like, Judge, I'm ready to give my argument. Let's go.
What I realized is I don't need so much the resolve, but I do need the I love you. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's all I need. And then I'm okay. If I don't get that and I just get a shut down person, I'm not going to bed. He will sleep like a baby. I will not be able to rest unless there's something resolved. But my give is, maybe we can't resolve it tonight. Actually, we definitely can't, because he needs time. He needs his space.
Yep.
And if I'm respecting that, then I will settle for the I love you. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And ultimately what we're saying is that's communication, right?
Yeah.
Because our husbands are similar in that way. That took years for us to even understand what was happening. Like you have to understand how your spouse argues and like what that looks like and how they communicate, because I saw a man shutting down, being dismissive, refusing to talk about it, and then seemingly being totally unaffected, like just going about, you know, your life. And that caused in me like, I am boiling. Like I am ready to explode because my anger is just rising. And he's thinking, well, she's upset. She needs time. And I was like,
you're like,
I know. Like that is the worst thing you could do right now. But once I understood that he's not being dismissive, he's not just shutting down. Like he
Yeah.
he needs time to process what's happening and what he wants to say and how to resolve this. Like, that made a huge difference.
For Thomas, it was different because he is, as we've talked about, he's very honest. He's very blunt. And he was, out of love, choosing to shut down.
Yeah.
Because he knows, I could say something that could destroy her
Right,
now.
right.
My love language, words of affirmation. As great as words are, they're just as effective in the opposite way for me. And maybe we should talk about that at a different time too. Like, even what, like, this slight tangent, but the physical touch, like people who have a physical touch love language, if they are touched inappropriately or something, it has such an unbelievable negative effect on them. Like, whatever your love language is, it's beautiful and it's great. Whatever the counter to that is really, really, really tough to get over sometimes. Yeah. And my husband, knowing that, chooses to shut up and give me some space. Like, this is for you.
It's for you. Yeah.
This isn't even for me. And again, I did not know that on year one.
Right.
That took a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaking of communication on year one, I spent our first Valentine's Day married scrubbing our floors in our apartment because when I said, let's just have a low-key Valentine's Day, in my head, that meant, like, why don't you order Chinese? We'll watch a movie and, like, exchange cards.
Yeah.
That's what I envisioned.
That's what you envisioned.
As
That's
a
what you
low-key
communicated to yourself.
Valentine's
Yes.
Day. That's what I communicated to myself and I thought was
Very
obvious.
clear.
I just I couldn't have imagined a world in which a low-key Valentine's Day meant we will do nothing at all. That we will pretend this is not a holiday.
We're boycotting Valentine's
Yeah, we're just like,
Day.
nah, we're gonna just pass.
Like, we don't even need to eat today. Like, like there's nothing. There's
no food.
nothing happening.
How
today.
disappointing.
And I was just so, like, I don't even know, hurt and ticked off and all the things that I was like I'm going to scrub my floors tonight because there's nothing else happening.
Rage cleaning.
Yeah.
Yes. Rage cleaning. So yeah, I think that. And like,
no happy ending to that story.
No, that was it. But a lesson learned. But on, like, a general level, communication's important. Perhaps on Valentine's Day,
very important.
Communicating about what your expectations are
Yeah.
with whatever your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. It's just a good idea, maybe, of like, you know, what you're looking for specifically, what's gonna make you feel loved and appreciated and cared for on this day. And I think, you know, being honest and not just being a woman, being like, I don't need anything and expecting all the things. But
so I listened to a podcast about communication in reference to, like, relationships, and something that the speaker was saying is, like, it actually takes more for you to tell, and it shows more love for you to tell, you know, your spouse or husband right there, like, what you want. It actually is like a sign of love. It doesn't mean that you're being picky or choosy. That it's showing them, like, that they don't have to guess, because that's, like, selfish. Be like, you should know my mind because we've been, you know, together. It actually is like, no, hey, I care about this relationship. This is my likes and dislikes. Like, hey, I'm just gonna share them with you, not to be like, okay, well, you didn't know, and to, like, test them, but just to out of an act of kindness and be like,
and that can range from your passions in life, like, this is what I want out of life. This is my dreams and my aspirations too. Could you do the dishes tonight, please?
Something
like,
as simple as that.
It has there's such a large spectrum of the things that we need to communicate to each other that we refuse to, because it's just easier to say, well, shouldn't they just know?
Yeah.
right.
They know me so well. Shouldn't they just know? And I will fully admit, I am still dealing with that.
Oh, yeah.
It's still hard for me. Like, would I just love for my husband to just get up off the couch and say, gosh darn it, I think I'm going to clean the house unprompted. Like, sure, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So if I want that, that's on me to say, babe, could you help me out tonight? I'm a little tired tonight.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, whether you've been dating for 6 months or married for 6 years or married for, you know, 20 years, I think we have to be reminded and prompted to like keep checking in with each other and not just assume that like this is what it's going to be because we've been doing it long enough, because one, that's how you get into a rut, right? Like, yes, flowers and chocolate are nice, but like if you're just on autopilot, like it loses something there. And, you know, we change. It depends on like what kind of year, what kind of week we're having, what phase of life that we're in of what's going to feel fulfilling. Because there are years where genuinely that's what I would have wanted. Let's order Chinese and watch a movie and give cards and nothing else. But there are other years where I'm like, I want a night out. Like, let's get fancy and let's go out to eat and, you know, or like, let's have our friends over for a party. Like, you know, it just changes in what you need as a couple, what you need individually. And so, yeah, having those check-ins and being direct and transparent with like, this is what I need this year.
There's no need to read each other's minds. Let's just be vocal about it.
Yeah. Take the guesswork
It always
out.
comes down to communication.
Yeah.
Right?
So tell us your Valentine's Day plans. Maybe if you're going out to eat, any good restaurants, let us know.
In the tri-state area.
Tri-state area, yeah, not across.
Actually,
maybe a flight to California.
Morris County, New Jersey.
Really, anywhere. We are willing
We will
to
go
take a
anywhere.
trip. Okay, give us a reason.
Definitely. And remember, don't forget to enjoy the view wherever your ride takes you.